in some ways, New Year's is a great time to set goals and look forward to the next chapter in life. But I think we all have experienced the frustration of setting New Year's resolutions and then falling short just a couple months in. Sometimes I've been so frustrated with the New Year's thing that I've completely avoided the process of setting New Year's resolutions. Today, I want to share the one thing I have found to be more effective than New Year's resolutions or annual goals, but it is still very motivating and helpful in making lasting change in your life. We have answered the call. We are committed to a greater purpose. We are fathers. Past achievements do not guarantee future success. We will prime ourselves often to navigate each new challenge. We are capable, brave, and relentless. We will remain undaunted. So this one thing I'm talking about is a book literally called The One Thing by Gary Keller. Gary is the founder of the largest real estate agency in the U.S., Keller Williams. And in the book, he describes how he tried to live life in the rat race, doing all the right things at the right time and managing 100 different things and helping with all these people. And when he talks about it, he says, it got me success and it got me sick. Eventually, it got me sick of success. And so what happened was he had this burnout and this breakdown where he just got tired of all of it. And he started to look at his life and look at what he thought success meant and what was valuable in life. And he started to break down these different axioms of our culture and what success means and what productivity means. And in the book, he comes up with quite a few really great examples and stories and tips. And I think the first time that I read this book was probably 3 years ago, and it did really help me to figure out how to prioritize things and how to really work in the right areas, put my energy and my attention in the right places. But I'm still not great at following this. I'm still spread pretty thin, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this book and this principle today, is just because I need the reminder, and I think that we all need the reminder. And one important thing to remember about the one thing is that this is a principle that you can follow, but in practice, everything is always messier, and so you shouldn't get down on yourself or worry if you can't follow it perfectly, or if your job doesn't allow you to, or if the strain of running the family and taking care of everything makes you feel like you're not focused. That's normal, but I think that this book really helps anyways. So a lot of the value and the principles that are drawn out of this book come from a Chinese proverb that says, if you chase two rabbits, you will catch neither one. And I think that's definitely true. Back when I was serving my LDS mission back in North Carolina, there was a bunch of rabbits that lived on the grass by our apartment, and my companion and I got bored actually, and we bought football cleats and we went out and chased rabbits every night just to see if we could catch them. And it was ridiculous and stupid and funny, and when we actually caught a rabbit, which was very rare, it was hilarious and painful. But this proverb really does strike a chord with me because of that, because there is no chance that you will catch a rabbit if you're chasing two of them at a time. You have to pick one, lock in on it, and dive for it. Go head first after it in order to catch one. So, in The One Thing, Gary Keller cites a book called Quality Software Management by Gerald Weinberg. And in this book, there's a study that Gerald did where he watched programmers and chronicled their progress over a 5-year period. And what he found was the programmers who had committed to one project to work on at a time were 100% effective, but each project that was added to their list or that they committed to stole 20% more of their productivity. So if they had 5 projects that they had committed to work on simultaneously, they were only 20% effective each day, or 20% of their time each day was used effectively. And the other 80% of their time was swallowed up in what Gary calls context switching losses or switching costs, as we often hear, as well as other meaningless tasks and confusion that go along with more and more projects. So, an interesting thing that I also learned from the book was there's a context switching losses activity that you can do, and this is how it goes. First, you want to see how fast you can say the numbers 1 through 5. So I'll do that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's probably less than a second. And so we'll just keep that in mind. And then the next one is how fast can you say the letters A through E? So I'll do that now. A, B, C, D, E. That's probably right around a second as well. So now the third step in the activity is to see how fast you can say the numbers and the letters alternating back and forth. So I'll do that now. 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E. That was terrible. I'll try that again. 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E. Okay. So that was about 4 seconds that took me. So you can practice this on your own, but what I find when I do it is you would think that saying both the numbers and letters alternating would just take twice as long as what it takes you to say just the numbers straight through or just the letters straight through. But what it's actually showing is that it took me almost twice the amount of time than I expected in order to alternate back and forth. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one is making the decision to switch back and forth is distracting to the current task that you're working on before you're switching to the next task. It's also you have to pick up where you left off, which requires you to reorient yourself with the rules, the requirements, the order of the tasks, and all of that in order for you to pick up on the next one and start over. So even with something as simple as saying numbers 1 through 5 and letters A through E, alternating back and forth, has those little switching costs in it and makes things take even longer. If you're working on complex projects or unrelated things, then it takes even longer to switch back and forth. So in this book, The One Thing, they make a really strong case against multitasking and in talking about how you should just focus and prioritize. And really the real value of the book is this question that Gary came up with that he asks himself daily and on a larger scale yearly and on the ultimate scale of what does your life want to be about. And his question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? This question is really powerful when you're trying to prioritize your day, when you're trying to prioritize your week, when you're setting goals for the month or for the quarter, or even for when you're trying to define your purpose. And I have been using this question to filter what I do and how I do things for quite a while. And like I said before, I am always spread quite thin. I'm a learner first and foremost. Above all else, I just love to learn. I love to dig in and see how things work and make correlations from one place to the next. And I just love to get in and try new things. And that's awesome because I can carry a conversation with anyone, and I can usually solve just about any problem based on related experience or something that I've picked up somewhere. But it comes with a serious cost of distraction because I have this ridiculously long list of interests and hobbies and desires that are pulling me in every different direction. And then too, when it really comes down to it, the list of different skills that take me in different directions get me making commitments to do different things with different people, and so I get spread really, really thin. And this question helps me to say no to a lot of things. It also helps me to really focus on what's most important and what things I have to get in versus what things are just fun or just easy. And so there's a few different takeaways that I've gotten from this study of the book, The One Thing, and from the practice of trying to follow it for the last couple of years. The one right off the bat is urgent tasks and things are not equal to important tasks and projects. And I think it's really easy for us to get caught up in the urgent all the time and just be constantly solving little problems or helping with little things or just doing the bare minimum because that's what's necessary to keep things running, when in reality we should think bigger, we should plan for doing the important things, and then we should either say no to the other things or figure out a way to delegate them or figure out a way to automate them. And it's like the analogy of the rocks versus the sand in the jar. If you have 10 rocks to fit in a jar and a cup of gravel to fit in that jar and a cup of sand to fit in that jar, the order that you put them in the jar makes a big difference for how they fit. If you put the sand in the jar and then you put the gravel in the jar, there won't be room for those rocks to fit in the jar. But if you take those rocks, the things that you have to get in there first, and you put those into the jar first, then you pour the gravel around the rocks, and then you pour the sand in, the gravel and the sand fit around the rocks and they seep in and it all fits in the jar. That analogy, I think, is really important for setting goals and for making lasting change and improvements, because you have to decide what's most important and you have to block that time out of your day or your week to work on those things first. That's putting the rocks in the jar first. And then all of the urgent things and all of the things that are easy that you would like to do and all of the fun things, they all kind of fit in and sift their way down, and it all fits in the week. I think that that's a really powerful example of how to fit it all in. So the next takeaway that I've gotten from the practice of following the one thing is the shortest path between two objects is a straight line. And what I mean by that is, I think, illustrated well in Jesse Itzler's stories. I'll put a link to one of his videos on YouTube in the show notes here. But he talks about how he started his different businesses and became a billionaire, and his recurring theme was he would always go straight to the most powerful, most potent thing when he had an idea. So when he had the desire to be a rapper, he didn't go through this long process of creating album artwork and trying to make friends at clubs and get introductions from the club owners to music industry people and then work his way in over a matter of years. What he did was he shortcutted the whole system, and this was back in the 90s, I think, but he literally would play an instrumental song on his tape player, and then he would go to his answering machine and record a message of him rapping with the background music playing, and that was his demo. And he literally took that really archaic and basic version of his demo straight to a record label. He wiggled and squirmed his way into a record label office, and he got a meeting with a top executive right off the bat, and that was how he got his record deal. And then same for when he started Marquis Jet. He did almost the exact same pattern where he was wanting to start this private jet leasing company. And so he got a meeting with Warren Buffett's company that owned 800 jets so that he could leverage their jets rather than him trying to raise money to just get one. He just went straight to the 800-pound gorilla and had the conversations on that level and pushed for it and figured out how to make it work. And that was how he was able to make $5 billion over a couple of years and then sell the business. It's crazy, but asking the question, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary, really takes you to those kind of results and those kinds of actions, because it helps you to sift through all the other things that you would be tempted to think are productive or helpful in reaching your goals. Because a lot of us think, I want to start a business. I'm going to write a business plan. I'm going to get a logo made. I'm going to get business cards. I'm going to start networking. I'm going to test things out. And I'm going to have my bank account set up. And I'm going to figure out my lawyer and my accountant and all of these things. And once I'm all ready, then I'll go and start to sell my product. When if you think about it, what's the one thing that you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary, is to take your prototype, get it in customers' hands, and see if they'll buy it. If they'll buy it, you know that you have something that you can work with, and then you can fill all those other blanks in as you go, but you actually have cash to start those things out with if you have the product. And so I think that finding that shortest path between two objects is much easier when you're asking that question. Another thing that I've learned from Gary's book and from watching Jesse Itzler and a few of these people is that success is sequential, not simultaneous. And what that means is everyone who achieves huge success or really achieves their goals focuses on the one thing that they have to do in order to achieve that goal. And they kind of let everything else take a backseat until they've got that either accomplished or until they've created a habit that will sustain their progress toward that goal. And so what I've learned is it's okay to not be great at everything all at once. It's okay to put certain things off in order to achieve something and make it happen. And then once that thing is rolling, then you can go to the next thing and set a goal for that and focus on that and make that your one thing. And that was actually how I started the podcast, on top of work and doing things for Rugged Material. I kind of had to create this I think 60-day timeline of everything that I had to do in order to get the podcast figured out and up and running, and to get it accepted by the different broadcasting houses and things like that. And so I put a few other things off in order to get that done. But once I got it rolling, then it was easier to maintain. Then I went to the next goal. So those are just a few of the takeaways that I've gotten from this study. And I do just want to suggest that instead of making New Year's resolutions for every area of your life and setting it as a year-long goal, ask the question, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? When you ask that question, hopefully you see one big thing that you're looking for, and then you can break that down into smaller chunks. And instead of setting a New Year's resolution for the whole year, maybe you just set a 1-month goal for that very best low-hanging fruit thing that's part of the one thing answer. And you just aim for that one thing, and you just focus on it. And then once you accomplish that, you ask the question again, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And then that answer should lead you to the next thing. But if you are setting goals and trying to make lasting change in your life by doing it this way, it's much more tangible. The intervals are much more manageable. You're allowed to give yourself a break in between goals and challenges. And I've found that it helps me to accomplish things much, much more effectively. I just want to challenge you to try asking that question. And if you're interested in the book, definitely go check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes in the description. And I just hope that everyone has a great 2021. 2020 has been a hard year for most of us, and we'll be happy to move on, but I think that there's a lot of good that comes from a hard year as well. I just want to finish the podcast off by saying that I really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to this episode and to listen to our other ones. The goal for Primed Fatherhood is really just to keep the conversation going about what it takes to be successful and to be a strong father. Fatherhood is such an important role, and it's hard to keep up with it. It's hard to do all the different things that make a great father, and so the challenge here is just to keep chipping away at things each week and to keep that conversation going. If you want to interact more with other fathers who are like-minded as us, you can join the Prime Fatherhood Facebook group. We'd love to have you there. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who you think would be benefited by it. And please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating wherever you're listening. Thanks again, and remember to stay primed.